Russia's committed over 10,000 accused war crimes, including the rape of men, women, children, the execution of innocents, and all sorts of other horrific actions, including using weapons that are capable of destroying cities. And with Putin's declining health state with his cancer, he has even stated that he would launch nukes against Sweden and Finland if they were to join the UN and NATO. If the world does nothing and just proceeds to send money, what good is money when your cities are destroyed and your homes are reduced to rubble? The only way to get Russia to back off is to send troops into Ukraine to help them defensively, to ensure that their people are not wiped out by an evil warmonger. We cannot appease dictatorships. We have to fight for democracy everywhere. We have the biggest military in the world, and if we're going to use it, we better use it to defend other democracies.
People. We believe that we should stay where we are with Ukraine and Russia. We are going to be still sending them goods. We are going to be still sending them resources, but we're not going to increase or decrease that, because if we increase it, we don't want to overstretch America, but we don't want to decrease it in order to and leave Ukraine in ruin. Ukraine is more of a containment piece to us. We like them because they might join NATO and they might become democratic. But until they do that, we have to think of America, and we have to be a bit selfish and say, okay, let's take care of us while taking care of them as well.
I have a question for Aiden really quick. I'm assuming you're aware of the threat that Russia would pose to us if we were to put military into Ukraine. How far are you willing to go in that situation?
In this scenario, when a warmonger is already threatening the world, Putin has already claimed to have interballistic missiles capable of hitting us, and missiles capable of hitting London, Warsaw, and Paris within 200 seconds. He even claimed to have a missile that could sink the British Isles. It's clear that this man is already planning on global domination. He has spoken many times about his dreams to rebuild the Soviet Union. And the fact is, sometimes you have to fight fire with fire. And as I said earlier, you can't just appease a madman. And in this case, even though it may end in war, you have to defend people of all kinds, no matter what, when they're under threat by a dictator. Did that answer your question, ma'am?
I also have a question for Aiden.
Of course.
So if it were to go into war, do you think we'd be well prepared in coming back from that? How do you think we'd do with all the costs of war?
Frankly, I feel like we would be more than okay. We have 1.4 million active duty members. Our military is valued at $693 billion, the largest in the world. We're prepared to fight any superpower. And the fact is, if we're not going to use it to help the people who can't defend themselves, then what good is America's role as a protector of the free? Am I doing it wrong?
Sensitive to the folks who are listening, so if you can bang it on the podium.
Whoops. Not bad.
Moderators, I know it's tough with the microphone, so if you have a question and don't feel like you can reach the microphone, just ask it aloud, and then whoever's near the microphone can just let the audience know what was asked.
Okay, so I had a question quickly for Winston on your policy for Ukraine and Russia. You talked about inflation being an issue if America supports the passage of the $40 billion Ukraine aid package. But actually, I'm not sure if you're aware, but that passed the U.S. Senate yesterday, I believe, and it's now being flown to President Biden in Korea to sign. So obviously, and it passed with a huge bipartisan majority, meaning that both Democrats and Republicans support this bill.
Yeah.
So I guess I'm asking, why are you opposed to it? And is it really so much to pay for increased inflation for maybe an extra dollar at the gas pump to pay to help Ukraine and save Ukrainian lives?
Okay, yeah, that's a good question. Me personally, I feel that this effect of 40 billion like going towards Ukraine, right? It's being passed, and I feel really that it's gonna, like you said, it's gonna affect gas prices. It's gonna affect people's lives, right? For example, and I feel I'm just trying to look out for U.S. citizens first. I'm trying to put America first. I know what's going on in Ukraine right now is like, it's really evident, it's really important, and it's gonna have a big impact. But I feel right now, I'm just trying to look out for U.S. citizens. I'm trying to put you guys first. I'm trying to help America. I'm trying to focus on our issues. I'm trying to stand up for our social issues going on right now. Example, George Floyd. I'm trying to stand up for everything going on right now. You might not think that's relevant, but so many domestic issues that we have that's just really like biting us in the tail end, really. It's not making us what I feel a democracy truly is. And just taking a step back and genuinely looking at ourselves is more important right now.
Also, Winston, I do have a question for you too. In your press release and on your website, it states that you seek to cut economic and diplomatic ties with Russia.
Yeah.
And I'm just thinking about how with Russia, they're one of the top producers of wheat, corn, fertilizer, very essential items. So if you do decide to enact these cut economic and diplomatic ties, how would you deal with the possible repercussions it could have on the United States? Because there have been food shortages for a while now, and I'm just wondering how you deal with the possible repercussions of cutting these economic and diplomatic ties with Russia.
So
okay,
the
yeah,
question for
Wait,
Winston.
can we repeat the question into the microphone?
The question for Winston was how he would deal with the repercussions of cutting ties with Russia in regards to necessary goods.
Okay, so I keep mentioning domestic issues, right? I feel that's the perfect time to actually build more farming, put money towards farming, put money in ourselves, right? And we'll receive a greater payment back. We have to sanction Russia for what they're doing right now. That's a no-brainer, but right now I feel we have to put money back in ourselves. We have to take the money that even though the bill has been passed, take the money that's going towards Ukraine and put that back in America. And I feel like that would address your issues, right? We would support farmers, which would basically just strengthen the U.S., strengthen us, and then in advance, add to that, it would also build a greater sense of nationalism within the country. It's basically empowering people. It's giving the people money, which me and my staff support 100%. It's the United States people. We put you guys first. That's what we're trying to do.
Okay, and then there was one more question, but just to clarify, in the balance of foreign and domestic issues right now, you feel that we aren't supposed to lean more towards foreign, you're supposed to lean more towards domestic right now and focus on the US.
Right now in the America's climate, I feel like leaning towards domestic issues is way more important.
Okay. Would you like to say something?
Yes, I would actually. Winston, you claimed that you wanted to sanction Ukraine?
No, I never said that. I said sanction Russia.
Oh, you must have misspoke. I'm sorry then.
Did I? Okay,
yeah.
my bad.
Okay, since Aiden brought this up, talking about Finland and Sweden, recently they have submitted their applications to NATO, ending decades-long. This is for anyone. Ending decades-long neutrality. What steps are you taking moving forward? Will transatlantic unity last? And do you believe this will lead to World War III? Yeah.
I feel like with those countries joining NATO, and as it being our responsibility as
Microphone.
since those countries have joined NATO, and since we are a major part of NATO, I feel it is our responsibility to protect those countries. And like what Aiden said, he said we have the biggest military in the world. Well, with all these added NATO countries, we're becoming stronger than Russia. I still say, Aiden talked about appeasement. What I'm talking about is not appeasement. What I'm talking about is to make sure that there is no further escalation. Of course, there is going to be a limit. For example, if Russia transgresses beyond Ukraine or begins invasion into other countries, threats don't mean anything unless they act upon them. So I personally would not act if they did. I personally would not act if they threatened us. I would only act in response, like a reaction.
I feel that with those pieces joining NATO, we do have the duty now to help them out. Going off of that, we we can most likely now help. And then Russia, I feel like we should take their threats seriously because they have been pretty good on their word. So with us, it wouldn't be more of a threat. It would be like more of a base. We're going to keeping it not on the back burner, but on the let's keep it on our front burner.
With Sweden and Finland's attempt to join NATO, this, as you probably know, is the end of their decades-long neutrality. For example, I read that in Finland, as of now, 74% of the Finnish public approve of joining NATO. That is a sharp increase from the 20% who approved of the very same action in 2019. This shows that Russia's threats against Ukraine have scared Sweden and Finland enough that even though they were longtime allies of the US and our friends in NATO, they're now seeking the protection of Article 5, that the attack of one member of NATO is an attack on all. And we have to be ready to defend these nations as well, because Putin has said that he will retaliate. He stated it. And when a madman tells you that he's going to go and do something crazy, he's crazy. You got to kind of expect that. You can't just let him waltz over there. Finland and Sweden have way smaller populations, way smaller military. If Putin decides to invade them now while Turkey has denied their NATO process, which could extend their process of joining NATO up to a year or more, then we have to step up and use our military that I said we'd used for good in Ukraine to step in and make sure that this dictator doesn't end up taking down two of the world's most developed countries.
You keep talking about how you want to put your military helping Ukraine and basically fighting Russia.
Yeah.
Isn't that just going to cause like nuclear warfare? What do you have to say about like humanity itself?
I would say about humanity that the thing is, nuclear warfare, if Putin's advisors have any backbone at all, they won't allow him to send a nuke, because nuclear warfare does not just mean the end for whoever.
Didn't you
you're
say he was
nuking.
crazy?
Oh, he
Didn't
is
you say he was crazy?
Which is why we need to work against him now to fight him before he does even more unforgivable acts. With the rape of men, women, and children happening in Ukraine, we've already seen that he's willing to let his soldiers get away with anything. His soldiers are not even trained well, and they're being taken out of their homes. I've read several accounts of Ukrainian soldiers who were captured, Russian soldiers who were captured by Ukrainian soldiers who turned out that they thought they were fighting the good fight against Nazism. Putin has said several times that Nazism is the reason for the war in Ukraine. He is a well-known liar, a well-known hack, and in many diplomatic events, he has shown time and time again that he's prickly to all world leaders. And getting involved militaristically may be the only chance we have at stopping him, because he eats Ukraine. He annexes it, okay? Then what? Then he moves on to Finland and Sweden while they're in their application process. And if we stand idly by and let him just get stronger and stronger, eventually it'll be too late to avoid a nuclear war. You have to hit him now while his military is in ruin after the defeats in Kyiv and the rest of the cities in Ukraine. The Ukrainian resistance is doing a great job fighting, but they can't do it alone.
Aiden, how would you respond to the fact that Finland and Sweden have already signed military agreements with like the United Kingdom for joint security in the process of while they're applying for NATO membership?
I would say that that is a really smart choice, because that means that, again, because of that pact, that if Russia did attack Finland or Sweden, it would pull in the United Kingdom. And if they actually fought against the United Kingdom, under Article 5 of NATO, that would pull in the US, Spain. It would pull in every NATO member. So it was a smart play by Finland and Sweden to do this to ensure that their sovereignty is safe.
But you were saying that we should attack preemptively before Russia has a chance to attack Finland and Sweden?
I'm saying we should prepare our troops there to prepare as a defense. We shouldn't attack Russia directly unless they continue to commit the atrocities that we're seeing them commit.
Where's the line then? When do you decide that?
The line is, if we see them cross into the borders of Finland and Sweden, that puts them in a stance where they're attacking a nation because they're trying to join another defense organization, and they're joining NATO because they're terrified of Russia. And if Russia invades, that confirms their fears. And while the UK already has a defensive pact with them, right now we need to make sure that we're still providing aid and showing them that we have solidarity with them against this Russian threat. Did that answer your question well enough? Thank you.
Okay, we're gonna move on to the next policy. We're gonna go down the line again and just explain what your policy is on global warming and climate change.
Okay, so for climate change, something we would do is put in place a graduated carbon tax on fossil fuels. This would encourage companies to lean more heavily on natural resources. Something else we would do is provide subsidies to these companies to further encourage that. We do understand, however, that this would put a lot of people throughout like certain regions of the world who kind of rely on their jobs mining fossil fuels, like economically. Something we would do to address this is put in place kind of a community outreach if like widespread unemployment hits, and we would kind of retrain these people, kind of provide aid for their families. We do understand this would also take some money. So instead of taking out of military spending or health funding, we would declare a national emergency on climate change, which we believe at this point is very necessary. And in doing this, there is a set of funding kind of set aside, and we could use that for the problems that we could address.
Okay. First and foremost, the government's going to stay in the Paris Climate Accord, and I feel like the government should greatly promote like people being less ignorant about basically climate change. I feel like people should. I feel like every U.S. citizen should know like their carbon footprint or the big businesses that lead to the electricity that's permitting greenhouse gases, for example, and that'll just be the first thing, informing the people, right? And then from there, I feel that it would be like the perfect time to make a step from coal to natural gas. Now, I say natural gas as like the middleman, for an example, because this is it's abundant, it's more abundant than coal is, and it's even though it like has emissions and permits out like negative stuff for the environment, it's still half the amount that coal supplies, for example, and it would be a better option than coal is right now. And I just mainly feel that we should inform the people about what's going on right now, like what their carbon footprint is, in order to take a change towards like differences, because I know a lot of people in this room right now do not know much about their carbon footprint.
I think I want to start off by saying that this is like not political. This is the future of our lives, our children's lives, and also not just this country, but just if we have a country later on. So a couple things our campaign wants to do is a tiered rate system. So if companies go above a certain level of greenhouse gas emissions, they'll have to pay a fee, and this would be between 50 to 100,000, and it'll be reoccurring, because if it's a one-time fee, they'll gladly pay it and move on with their lives. And this will apply to all businesses. We're also going to put more funding into PTC. That's a tax credit the U.S. already has, where if businesses use qualifying renewable energy, then they get tax credit that they could use. And then I hope we all know that agriculture is one of the primary factors of the climate crisis. So we are going to provide financial compensation to farmers that choose to switch to sustainable farming methods.
Plan is actually extremely beneficial to the economy, unlike these programs that promote higher taxes, which would in fact increase gas prices, especially due to the companies need to make profit off of gas. So all these low-income communities would suffer, and that's just not what we want. So what we propose is maintain the carbon tax at where it is currently, and promote a switch to renewable energy by deregulating renewable energies and giving them tax breaks, or decreasing the amount of taxes that they would pay, making renewable energies more profitable, increasing investment opportunities, just making it a more profitable endeavor.
Bedri made a good point about the renewable energy tax credits. I spoke to Mr. Tima earlier this week, and you know what he told me? He has a hybrid car. He's saving the environment. That's a great thing. Unfortunately, under Ohio law, he's paying an extra $100 in taxes every month because he has a car that is a hybrid. And if you have a fully electric car, you pay an extra $200. They say this is because you're not buying gas. So even our own government, which is claiming to be pretty like, it says it believes in climate change, it says it's a real crisis, but yet they're still punishing people on the individual level who do act for it. And even on the individual level, to put into perspective the effects of climate change, Louisiana, a state you wouldn't really expect to be suffering from climate change, off the coast of Louisiana, those islands it has lost, due to the rising sea level, over 2,000 square miles of land. If that were to have happened in the Northeast, Rhode Island and Delaware would have been wiped off the map. The threats of global warming are very real. We could see that with the rising sea level, as I mentioned, the forest fires raging in the west, and the extreme temperatures and weather effects we're seeing, like hurricanes and tornadoes more frequently. My team believes that the best option to combat this is a Green New Deal, because global warming is already happening. We're seeing the effects of it firsthand. And the only way now is to work as hard as we possibly can to halt it in its tracks before the effects get too bad. Right now, our Green New Deal plan consists of infrastructure, making ways to get water in drought-stricken cities, building up bridges and flood walls, even creating floating cities like the Maldives is doing to compare for the rising water levels. For example, New Orleans is a prime candidate to become a floating city and have flood walls, because by 2050, the city is below sea level enough that it is projected to be underwater. And that's not the only effect of the climate crisis we're seeing. For example, by 2100, the World Health Organization says that 183 million people will be dead from climate change. And 187 million more people will be forced to leave their homes. Obviously, a part of that will be American citizens, people living in the coast in cities like Los Angeles and San Francisco, people living in the east with cities that have rivers in them, like Philadelphia. Philadelphia is projected to also be underwater by 2100. My point is, climate change is a big issue, and only through a carbon tax and through a Green New Deal aimed at hitting all the issues and saving countless Americans and helping with displacement can we even make a dent in this crisis. However, we can't just work domestically. We're in the Paris Climate Accords, and we need to make sure the rest of the world pays their share. While America is the second largest contributor of greenhouse gases and pollution, China is much larger than it in its share, which means that the rest of the countries, if China's not willing to work to produce green energy and move into a more sustainable business model, I guess, then the other nations that we're allies with, the United Kingdom, France, Spain, we all have to work together to make a movement towards green energy. We can't just do it alone. We can't just rely on the average American like you all. We have to tax big businesses, and we have to make sure that people aren't losing their homes and their livelihoods over a crisis that was preventable 20 years ago.
Thank you.
America has so many resources. We are so able to do things that we don't do. We have the ability to make renewable energy resources, but not many people know they can get them, nor do they even think they can afford them. Renewable energy resources such as solar panels, they aren't that expensive. However, they are more expensive than just simply getting gas. So what my campaign plans to do is raise the production of renewable energy resources in the U.S. Through subsidies. That way, more Americans can actually incorporate things such as solar panels into their homes to account for that renewable energy so that they know about it. And then also, we will be, I lost my train of thought, but we will be making sure that people are more communicated about the climate change. And we will start in America because while America produces 15%, and that doesn't seem like a lot, but it really is, we want to get to the world, but we can't expect other countries to do it unless we deal with America first.
Okay, sorry. So I just wanted to just share something briefly that we should probably try and make sure that our introductions are kept brief. That way we have time to get to as many policy platforms as we can. In terms of questions, I have another question for Winston. Sorry, I'm going down the list here. But you say that you talk a lot about helping solve climate change and global warming and the climate crisis. But what you're kind of advocating for, and what you said in your speech earlier in this week, and what I see on here, is primarily transitioning to natural gas and fracking, which comes with its own huge set of issues. And I guess what I'm asking is, we already get a huge amount of our energy from natural gas. So you're willing to pay to increase the infrastructure that we have to transition to natural gas. Well, then why not pay that money to take it a step further and go with fully renewable energy, because our planet needs it now?
Check your phone. What's today's date? Does anybody have the date?
May 20th.
May 20th.
You know that today is the recorded highest amount of gas prices? The highest amount of gas prices recorded today, right? I feel this transition towards natural gas is only like a stepping stone. It's quicker. It's basically it's quicker for the people. It's gonna show. It's gonna show a better gas prices, for example, and the transition from coal to natural gas is for your car. You don't need to go out and get a new Tesla. It's showing change like quicker than like switching to solar power, for example. It's a quicker change for American citizens because that's what they need. They need a change right now. They don't need change in 10 years. They're not gonna be like, oh, I'm not gonna pay that bill because change is gonna happen within 10 years. No, we need change now. That's why I'm making a switch towards natural gas, because it's better. It's slightly better for the environment, right? And it's also going to bring down gas prices, and you don't need to get an entire new Tesla in order to run off natural gas. That's why I feel like this change now is only like a middle. It's like a stepping stool towards solar energy, for example.
In your press release, you mentioned that you would like to preserve the environment. That was actually one of the key parts of your climate change policy. So I just think it's funny how you're promoting drilling and fracking and pipeline activities, which would harm thousands of acres of forests and woodlands. I mean, isn't that kind of like contradicting your own climate change?
No, not at all. I don't really think so. I feel like I just said, I feel that U.S. citizens need a change now, and that's best for the people. The people, putting power back in the hands of the people.
Okay. I actually have a question for Hira. Sorry. Let me pull up my doc. So you were talking about the taxes or the fees, $50,000 to $100,000. Amazon's revenue last year, what was it, $470 billion US dollars. Do you really think that fee would actually mean anything to them? And then also, this is a two-part, sorry. There are a lot of lawsuits going out against fossil fuel companies. What is your opinion on this? What do you think about this?
To start with the fee that I mentioned, the $50,000 to $100,000, that's why we made it like reoccurring. It's not gonna be reoccurring like annually or monthly. It's gonna be every certain amount of greenhouse emission. We don't have the number yet because it's hard to like distinguish. It would be per company depending. So that's why we would reoccurring it. That's why they would get the gist that like you need to stop, and it eventually will add up and it'll cost them a lot in the long run. And then can you repeat the second
The
part?
second question was about their fossil fuel companies being basically sued, like cigarettes, about they didn't really disclose the fact their like role in climate change and global warming. What do you think about basically that? Yeah.
I think it's perfectly fine that they did get a lawsuit because they are contributing to such a big amount of a climate crisis. And if they aren't willing to disclose that to the people don't know that buying this, you're contributing to everything that's going on right now. So I completely agree with that, and you should let them know that what you're doing is wrong.
Yeah.
And then I have a question, or I have something to say about another candidate. So Winston, you said that you want to stop using and get off of coal energy. It says that in your press release.
I mean, yeah, we want to make a change towards getting off of coal. I mean, that's why I'm transitioning from coal towards natural gas. I know coal is not just gonna go off the market. Like tomorrow, people are still gonna be driving coal cars, but we want to make a change as quick as possible for the people. We want to decrease gas prices, and basically, I want to help the people.
Okay, well, stopping or trying to stop using coal energy, that costs a lot of, you're gonna need a lot of money instantly to pay for those renewable energy sources, and you're gonna have to dig and continue digging into stores of oil, which uses fracking. And coal has 200 years left. Oil only has 47 to 50. So it's kind of not helpful to get off of coal because that's the only thing we have right now that's gonna last us 200 years, whereas oil only has
Okay, so first and foremost, I feel that what I'm talking about with domestic issues and putting money back in ourselves would make that make the transition way easier for coal to natural gas. And you're kind of seeming like you want people to keep like driving cars that run on coal and keep permitting greenhouse gases in the environment. Are you like, I don't understand. Are you for like pollution? Are you for climate change? Like,
I think I'm saying that it's not something we can easily just do so quick, getting rid of coal, because it's the only thing that's gonna last us even 100 more years. Because in 50 years, I mean, most of us are still gonna be alive, so we won't have oil left to use. So we're still gonna have to use coal for a bit before we get that money to switch to renewable energy resources.
yeah, I respect what you have to say, and
Oh, you can finish your thought if you want.
no, you can go.
Okay. Bedri, I do have a question for you. I'm sorry.
Okay.
I was also able to look at your website, and in regards to climate change, you said that you wanted to tax citizens in small amounts in order to fund renewable energy.
Yeah.
I just wanted some more clarification on that one, because I know that can be a little subjective, like especially like in regards to like your tax bracket and your income and stuff like that. So like, how would you go about like taxing citizens and like getting that revenue?
So when we say taxing citizens, we're not talking about all citizens. It's more like, you know, the gas guzzler tax, where more fuel inefficient vehicles have to pay higher taxes. That's pretty much what we're planning on doing. We're going to increase that tax, just make it, not make gas guzzlers more inaccessible, just make it not look more appealing financially.
We are going to move on to cryptocurrency just because of time restraint. And we also do want to keep like briefing in this situation to like a 1 to 2 minute thing. Don't elaborate too much. And we're going to start on this side this time. So go ahead.
So for cryptocurrency, what my campaign plans to do is kind of keep it to a more of an international level and not make it a national currency. It's very flimsy and it does produce a lot of carbon emissions, which would go completely against our climate change stance. So we would like to kind of just not make it a national currency at all. And if we have to use it, it would be universal between other countries.
Thank you. Our cryptocurrency stance is that we believe that cryptocurrency, as it is right now, while it's an unregulated mess currently. Without regulations, people are getting scammed by the boatload. For example, the recent Squid Game show, very popular on Netflix. A man made a cryptocurrency about it, Squid Coin, offering incentives, perks, all this great stuff. The Squid Coin skyrocketed with the popularity of the show, going up to $119 per share. Unfortunately, after several weeks, the Squid Coin creator disappeared. And due to the anonymous nature of cryptocurrency and the lack of regulation, he's still been found. He's scammed over $14 billion in total from people who are inspired by a Netflix show to invest in cryptocurrency. Obviously, this shows that and these were not just dumb people who had no education. These were investors he tricked. This shows that throughout all of the cryptocurrency right now, as it is, investors are being tricked and losing money. And due to the fluctuating prices of cryptocurrency, it's hard to make a profit. A lot of people will argue that cryptocurrency is free from the market. It's not affected by the economy, but that's simply not true. For example, the highest valued cryptocurrency has lost all cryptocurrency in general has lost $2 trillion from the beginning of this year. And that's showing that it's affected by the economy just as much as the stock market.
All right, Bedri, I'm going to give you 60 seconds, and then we're going to take our break. So, of course. Go ahead.
I'm going to keep it really short. Cryptocurrency is extremely unsafe, like Aiden mentioned. So what we're going to do is regulate it and tax it, just make sure it's safe for the American investor. And by taxing it, we'll also have more funding to pay for our climate change policies and other policies that we want to enact to make America better.
Thank you. All right, so here's what we're going to do. We're going to take about a 5-minute break. Candidates, this is a chance to catch your breath, talk to your advisors. Any of our first off,
I'm going to move down.
Yeah, I have to head out.
Did you say, Ryan?
Hey, you want to finish my
I'm gonna take a more active role. No, I'm sitting down. Should I start?
So it kind of sucked with the car thing.
I'll start. I want Okay, I'm gonna do some research. I was at Walmart yesterday. I walked in the door and the first person I see is Suits just walking in. I said, why is that whenever you're like, you're spending too much time on Suits? I was like, yeah, that's fine, right? The one thing that I said, and you said, oh, you're spending too much. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, when you said, okay. Yeah, you're right. I was like, that sounds a lot like Suits.
Wait, but like right here almost, or like, yeah. So like
you can actually have them if you want. Oh really? Yes, Nathan, you're the best. Not the donuts. Oh wait, just kidding. Wait, no, I like this. One of two options. Do you know, are any of those seats free?
I think I'm gonna slide down so those seats are really good. Yeah, down here I think we need a little bit. So you're gonna sit here, Grant?
Yeah.
Okay, so then I'm.
Are we all like, is this a thing? Like, is this a thing? I mean, I can.
Wait, so if I'm doing here, then I think you can like here. Yeah, I know,
I'm gonna start.
Yes, especially with motor guys, I'm gonna actually ask you about that because that stuff is like.
Oh, really? Why do you think that?
Yeah.
Whose phone is this?
Oh, that's Grant. Grant, stop being fat.
Okay, Grant, get yours.
Oh, wait.
Out of here.
Right here? Okay, I'm here then.
Oh, is it here? I'll be here.
Is this right here?
Yeah, I don't know whose computer this is.
No, that's mine.
Oh, okay.
Is this like out?
I don't care. Just before you leave, put it back.
We need someone that's like really short running down the passage. We'll just pick it up.
I need everybody start heading back toward their spot.
Or we can do what we did earlier, and you guys can ask questions live, and me and Wilson.
Yeah, why don't we stay right here?
You don't need to use it all if you don't want to.
Okay, so is that even on? It is? Okay. So if you don't know, I'm notorious on making a minute-long speech, 8.5 minutes, so get ready. I'm kidding. This is pretty awesome. I mean, it felt kind of like a lot of, I don't know, you were like, Nate, you got to get, it was mostly Brady. I had to wait for Brady to email him for like a week. He was like the last category. So thank you, Brady, finally. Yeah, I had to text my mom, which I thought was, I thought, oh, Brady's in his class. He can just say, hey, Mr. Witt, I support. No. Instead, I had to text my mom while she's working, and my mom wrote an email to Mr. Witt. So here I am. Guys, you're doing a great job so far. I've heard all your stuff. I think it's really good. Everybody else who's done it before, I was like, man, I wish I could have done it. Well, I did. And I was thinking I was probably the only person, and I guess I was. So look at that. So look at that. I'll see you guys when I'm 35, 36? 35. We'll see where that gets me. So thank you.
Thank you. And the handshake.
Absolutely.
And you can look at it, but you don't get to keep it. So it'll be on the plaque. Awesome. So
Congratulations. Hey, round of applause for our newest president. Hey, and just so we're clear, you're not the only one who started, you're the only one who finished. So sometimes that's what matters. All right, candidates, come on back up. Moderators, we'll turn the show back over to you all.
Okay.
We're timing them. We're giving them a minute.
Yeah, a minute.
And we're just moving on from crypto. We're not doing questions or anything.
Oh, we're not?
No.
Wait, they didn't finish their policy.
Yeah, and then we're not going to do questions because
Okay.
they're all the same.
Yeah.
Okay.
She said they could do this global warming. I was like, okay, I guess I could do this global warming.
Your opinion on each policy. We're going to continue with cryptocurrency. And I also want to say that all of you are doing amazing. Keep it up. Just try not to ramble because that tends to happen when you're nervous.
Risk of using cryptocurrency. There's data loss, illegal transaction, and you don't know who you're giving your money to. You could be funding a criminal's little plan, and there's no possibility for a refund or cancellation. So we want to make sure we regulate it so people have to register it through the government so you know who you're giving your money to when you're in the United States. Because even a week ago, there was a huge market crash and so many people lost their money. So we want to make sure that doesn't happen to our citizens.
Okay, so I personally feel like cryptocurrency should stay the same as the fact that capital made off of crypto should be taxed from the government. The only thing I would add is that the government should regulate companies before they go onto the market to prevent schemes like pump and dump schemes, for example, and from there feel like it's meant to be decentralized. And yes.
All right, so crypto obviously isn't like it's not a tangible dollar, so that makes it nearly impossible to regulate, along with the fact the decentralized trade markets make it impossible to regulate. Like with like all like stock exchanges kind of go through the Wall Street Journal, and they all go through one place kind of, and it's very regulated. And crypto isn't like that. It's very like foreign, and we don't know a lot about it. We believe that federal kind of adoption of cryptocurrency would risk citizen security, and also with cryptocurrency there's a risk of it getting in the hands of dangerous people like terrorist groups with the security aspect, just because it's like online. Arguably it isn't affected by inflation, but in El Salvador they use Bitcoin as their currency, and recently the value of that plummeted, and that just kind of sent them into economic ruin, so it's very risky.
Are we skipping questions? Skipping questions? Okay. Okay, so we're going to move on from cryptocurrency.
We're going to move on to voting rights.
We're going to do voting rights.
Oh, okay.
We're going to move on to voting rights, so if you just want to give your introduction on your policy of voting rights. We're going to start with Emily.
Okay, so with voting rights, we believe in the importance of democracy. We believe in everyone's has the right to vote. We believe it's very important to our government. Something specifically we would do is protect the rights of absentee ballots, which a lot of states are trying to kind of suppress because of voting fraud, stuff like that. We believe that absentee ballots are very important, specifically for people like elderly people who it's nearly impossible for them to get to the polls. We don't believe that we should take away their vote because of that. Additionally, people like minorities who may be facing intimidation tactics at the polls. We also believe that absentee ballots could give them the right to vote we don't want to take away the right to vote just because they may be scared to go to the polls. Another thing we would do is make every election day, local, state, and federal, a paid holiday. This would encourage a lot of people to vote because right now, saying that you can't go to work, telling your employer you can't go to work because you have to vote isn't widely accepted. So I think if we did that, we would see an increase of people voting.
With voting rights, I feel if you're 18, you should be able to vote because if you're able to go into the military and risk your life, you should have a say in what the government chooses. And also for the voter turnouts, I feel like it's too little, and me and my staff, like I've said before, will create a greater sense of nationalism within the country by supporting the people, supporting the majority, actually listening to your issues, right, and then passing bills to support you. Some of you might have heard this, but I've went up to my teacher and I asked her a question about issues she felt is going undressed, and she brought up maternity leave and paternity, and I feel like that's just one example of how we would strengthen the United States, their sense of nationalism in the end.
I think some of the biggest problems with voting rights right now is that they're not really accessible to a lot of minorities, and all people deserve to vote because their future depends on which candidate is elected. So we're going to keep the voting age to 18 because although some younger people can handle the right to vote, a lot can't or aren't educated enough. Right now in the United States, only citizens can vote. We are also going to make permanent residents / green card holders be able to vote, especially because if they're not living here for a majority of their lives, they're living here for all of it. And then as of felonies, and if people who are in jail, if they can vote, we're going to do for D-class felonies and under, so that's drug possession, robbery, drunk driving, and under. People can vote during their sentences, but for bigger, above D-class felonies, such as rape, murder, terrorism, you can't vote unless you get out of prison, and even then you have to wait till the next federal state election.
We're going to make voter registration more accessible online, and we're just going to make it more accessible. And we're going to provide mail-in ballots and mail-in ballot options to all registered voters if they choose to want to accept mail-in ballots. I'll answer some questions from Grant later.
Okay, so basically they've all told you that voting rights are under attack right now, but that none of them have provided specific examples. Since 2018 in Georgia, 214 polling stations have been closed, usually in areas where minorities live. This is to suppress the African American vote in that state. Furthermore, 12% of the mail-in ballots in the recent Texas primary election were tossed out. That's 23,000 votes that just simply were not counted. And gerrymandering itself is an issue. Within Ohio, there's 40% of the state Democratic and 60% Republican, yet in the House of Representatives, we have 4 Democrats only and 12 Republicans, and that math does not line up. To combat all this gerrymandering, this throwing out of votes, and even the removal of polling places, we'd like to take the failed John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act of 2021 and refurbish it as a federal amendment to the Constitution to ensure that rights are protected federally. The act would allow new election procedures and ensure that there's more polling places in areas with 20% or more minorities. It would allow an independent redistricting committee to ensure that states are actually fairly districted, so each party has their actual percentage of the say instead of being gerrymandered. What? Okay, yes, ma'am. Okay. It'll have multilingual ballots, easy access to polling, and it'll ensure that votes are counted fairly by an independent commission and make sure that mail-in ballots are accessible to all.
So for my campaign, we plan on increasing polling locations, especially in low-income communities, and we also plan to make voting a federal holiday. This way you don't have to pick between taking care of your kids and making that money between voting for the U.S. Because if it were up to probably the masses, they'd be like, I kind of need to take care of my kids. So we're going to be doing that. And And we are also going to be improving the online queue. That way you have a better idea of when your vote, where your polling polls are, how long it is to vote. That way you are not wasting your personal time because we are impatient.
Okay, I'll take the first question for Bedri. In your speech on Monday, and I think that I haven't really heard any big change in policy, you were
I have not.
against making Election Day a national holiday,
Mhm.
which kind of raised the question about, do you know your population, voter population here? Because I'd say the vast majority of your votes are going to come from students, and if you did make it a national holiday, not only would it provide citizens with a better chance, an easier opportunity to get to the polls, it would also provide all of us a day off of school. So my question to you is, do you know your voting populace, and have you since changed your plan about making it a national holiday?
Okay, we're gonna break this down.
Let me repeat the question. So there's a question from Grant to Bedri about his opinion, which is against making voting a national holiday, and he's asking if he knows his voting population in those regards.
Okay. It's extremely selfish to think of a national voter holiday as, oh, it's look, it's better for students because we don't have to go to school.
Which is why I said.
Yeah, of course. Okay. Okay, a voter holiday would be extremely detrimental to low-income communities because national holidays, for national holidays, employers don't have to give paid time off to employees. So primarily that occurs in low-income communities where employers will be given the opportunity to give their employees paid time off, but there's nothing that mandates them to get paid time off. So, I mean, people in low-income communities are obviously going to choose getting paid and providing for their families over waiting in line for hours just to vote for a politician.
But then they at least have the choice, right?
They at least, okay, look, you say they at least have the choice, but when you say they at least have the choice exists, but is it accessible to them? It's not. It really isn't, because the lens that most people see a national holiday through, of those who are for it, are from upper middle class or middle class communities who have employers who are willing to give employees paid time off for voter holidays. So this technically feeds into what Aiden was saying about how the gerrymandering thingy, whatever, or so it's just because people in upper middle class to middle class usually vote Republican. So this is obviously going to feed into that of it's just giving upper middle class and middle class more availability to vote in elections.
Okay, my question is to Hira, and sorry, we're starting with the hard questions now. So for underneath your voting rights plan, you said that obviously you'd be allowing people with former felony convictions to be able to vote, but you also say we will require voter ID and 2 forms of identification when voting. And then you say permanent residents of 2 or more years and who plan to live in the U.S. for over 10 years will gain the access to vote. Are you aware that that's against the Constitution?
So the question is from Will to Hira, asking about the unconstitutionality of her platform.
Well, I think that's like the biggest problem of voting, that minorities aren't always included in the Constitution. That's why we said that permanent residents should be able to vote. And I think we can all agree that in the United States, a lot of times the Constitution isn't always upheld in the right way as well. So I think we're just trying to make the biggest change that would be beneficial to everyone living in the United
But
States.
there's a difference between minority populations and the people that you're talking about here.
Yeah, I'm talking about permanent residents and green card holders who, specifically immigrants that have moved here and are staying here for a long period of time.
But that violates the Constitution.
Well, I think all I can say is that we're just trying to include everyone in the voting rights. And it would go along with when we said felonies. If you are a felon, you won't be able to vote. So
I have a question just for some of you, like Winston, Sydney, where in your press release you say that you want to like build new locations, build new like polling booths for people to go to, but my question is like, why are you focusing more on building these new locations instead of like utilizing existing locations like schools, churches, in order to like get in order to make like places for voting? Like, why don't you want to like use those existing places and yeah?
So the question is, why build new polling locations instead of using existing ones?
I feel like it's just a way to actually like get more people out to vote, encourage more people to vote, because I mean, for example, like what I said before, the voter turnout is so low. It's just like, it's more of the look to like encourage people to go to vote. And then also, like I've said before, me and my staff will build greater motive, like we will build pride within U.S. citizens to say like they're happy to be an American citizen, like, and that's just gonna lead to a greater voter turnout, which the polling locations would help citizens to get there.
Okay, I just feel like from an economic standpoint, like I feel it would be more of a burden to try and like get the money to build new locations instead of just utilizing existing ones for voting in order to just make it more accessible, especially in local communities. Like using an existing location would just make it easier for people to vote instead of just trying to build a whole new building.
And
for
I
voting.
think if we're on the same page going off of that, using that money to reduce like wait times instead of building another building where people will be also waiting for a long period of time, using that money to improve what we have instead of just multiplying like a low quality voting station.
My campaign actually, when we mean we're building more, we are going to still be utilizing those schools, the gymnasiums, but building that up, it's more of a second option, if that makes sense. More of a way if for some reason the school is like really far away or the church is a little farther than it should be. That was kind of our second location, and it wasn't the fact of building completely new ones. There are buildings in low-income communities that are broken down already that could just be rehabilitated, if that makes sense, where we could just rebuild those as building locations. But even if we do like completely build new ones, they wouldn't just be used for voting locations. They would be used for other things. That way it's just not a one-year use for the year.
We are going to grab Aiden's question really quickly and then try to move on after
Thank
that.
you. Hira, this is for you. Are you aware that there's already a 5 to 7 year pathway to citizenship within America, which guarantees with it the right to vote if you pass a citizenship test? Why would you provide another option when there's already an existing option outlined in our Constitution and in our laws already? Can you answer that, please?
Yeah, I think I would provide another option because a lot of the times the 5 to 7 years that are guaranteed to get your citizenship, there's always a ton of obstacles that kind of delay the process. And we can see that with a lot of guaranteed things in our country. So that's why giving more options will allow them to have a second option to be able to vote.
But I feel like more bureaucracy in the end ends in who's to say that your new program won't also have these same delays and setbacks as the current citizenship programs?
Because they would already have the permanent resident or the green card already, so they'd already be able to vote as long as they also come with the 2 forms of ID. That is also one of our rules.
But you are aware that voter ID restricts voting for low-income communities and illegal immigrants.
Yes,
Do you have a
that
pathway
is,
for them?
That's why we changed our voter ID policies, like what you need to do to obtain that to make it more accessible for minorities.
And this is shown in your press release?
Yes, it might be, but I did mention that in our introduction.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, let's move on to economy and inflation, and we're going to go down the line, starting at Sydney. Again, 60 seconds.
So our plan for inflation is to increase incentives for wage workers and truck drivers while also raising the minimum wage. This way people can actually accommodate to the raising prices. We are also going to be building the security on how and when we print paper money. In this way, we are also not increasing the inflation while we're building our minimum wage.
I like to say that inflation is like a 10-story building. You're at the highest peak of the building. You can't just jump off. You have to take the stairs. So you have to take actions to combat against inflation, to bring it down. You can't expect an instant recovery. My campaign has plans to cut some unnecessary government programs, to invest back into small businesses and big businesses alike to ensure that their workers are treated fairly and that there's still there's still money in the economy, and without printing new money, which would drive up more inflation. There's many government already funded things that are quite wasteful. Gardens at schools, $1.6 million. Yoga for members of Congress, $700,000. Live streaming eclipses, $3.7 million. And then the 8 Ivy League schools, who already receive a crap load of money in admissions, received a total of $9.8 billion. If we take some of this wasted money in government programs that just aren't simply good for anything, and put it back into small business, put it into big businesses, make sure that every corporation is supporting their people well, and with well-paid and supported workers, then eventually inflation will run down.
Currently, it's a supply and demand problem where, of course, we are not able to meet the demands of the consumers, but also because, like Sydney said, truckers don't have quality rest areas, and it's making them quit, making it harder to transport goods, making it more costly, which is overall not good for the economy. So what we're going to do is promote an infrastructure program to ensure better transportation and higher quality rest areas for truckers to make sure that they can transport the goods that America needs.
I think right now the main reasons for the supply chain shortage, the lack of workers, inflation, is because we have slightly cut off economic ties with Russia, which is a big part of it, which is where we get a lot of our oil. And then we just got out of a pandemic. Well, we're not completely out still, but COVID led to lack of workers due to death, illness around the world, which also led to supply chain shortages. So we want to get more workers in factories where we'll have more supplies of goods and less inflation. And then the incentives for the workers would be referral programs, EBT and SNAP benefits, and then medical benefits such as reduced dental care, medicine, medical care costs, because poverty rates are spiking, and a lot of mothers can't afford baby formula, so it's time we recognize that the American people need our help.
Okay, well, first and foremost, I feel this high amount of demand we have and low amount of supply all really comes from still COVID and people having to quarantine, holding their money, and then coming out and spending it, which is gonna cause it's gonna cause supplies to go down and then demand to increase, right? So I feel like, and another example is probably stimulus checks, which would also lead to inflation with printing more money. And I feel like a way to get supply and demand to a sort of equilibrium is to increase interest rates to get people to hold their money, right? To hold their money and not just go out and spend. And then me and my staff want to revoke unemployment benefits placed during COVID-19 in order to really just push people to get out there and work in order to get supply and demand to be on a sort of balanced level.
Okay. Something we know is it's much more difficult for the government to control supply than demand. Because of this, to address inflation, something we would do is raise Federal Reserve rates and interest rates, which would lead to lower bond prices, in turn decreasing inflation. Additionally, as opposed to taking a hyper-nationalistic stance, we would advocate for mutually beneficial and fair trade agreements, because today the U.S. economy is just a piece of the bigger world economy. An example of this is a trade agreement between the United Kingdom and the United States, a free trade agreement that was proposed in 2020 but never put into place.
I have a question. Emily, in your press release, it says the opposite of what you just said. It says because of rising demand, it's much easier to regulate than to stimulate supply. When you just said it's much easier to regulate supply than it is.
Oh, sorry, I must have switched my words. Yeah, that is what I meant.
Great.
Yeah, I had two questions. First of all, I just want to touch on Emily's platform. I don't have a question for you, it's just a compliment actually. Your platform with raising interest rates is probably by far the best answer for the economy and stuff, so I just want to touch on it. It's a very good answer. But I have a question each for Pedri and Winston. I'll start with Winston's question first. In your platform, you talked about combating inflation and gas prices by rebuilding or allowing the Keystone XL pipeline to be built. I was wondering, because I feel like that's a huge issue, and that, again, you're talking talking about wanting to preserve natural parks and federal lands and stuff like that. At the same time, we also need to keep in mind indigenous people and their rights. And I feel like you're talking about wanting to preserve these lands. Well, the Keystone XL pipeline actually like really destroys these federally protected indigenous homes and areas. So I guess what's the cost here?
I feel like I'm just trying to find like a balance between both worlds. Like I feel there's, I mean, the indigenous lands, of course, and then there's the people like who like need gas in order to live their lives. I'm trying to find like a sort of balance between each one.
Okay. And then for Bedri, my question for you is, you talked about in your platform wanting to improve infrastructure, improve roads and transportation methods and stuff like that. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, but my question to you is, in order to do that, you're going to have to spend more money to be able to do that, which would then in turn require more money to be printed, thus increasing inflation. So again, that seems kind of contradictory. What do you think about that?
Hold on. Grant asked Bedri his plan for improving infrastructure. Would that raise inflation, and what's his plan on that?
Yeah, I already know this because the last time when I gave my speech. So, my plan for this is, of course, interest rates are obviously going to, inflation is going to increase due to these spending programs by the government, but it's only going to be a short while until we get like the supply and demand thing under control, which would happen due to the infrastructure program that we would implement, which would correlate to a decrease in inflation.
I have a question for Kira. It says in your press release that you will stop providing aid to countries that no longer need it. Can you elaborate on that and like what countries you're thinking about possibly stop providing aid to and like what that would entail?
The question for Kira was which countries would we stop providing aid to?
So one of the countries we had in our example was Israel, because right now we give a huge amount of aid to them, and if you look, Israel's per capita gross domestic product is over 40,000, and that's the same as Great Britain and even France. So you can kind of tell that they don't need our aid anymore, and I'm not saying we're gonna just shut it off, because obviously that's going to increase tensions and it might lead to war. So we're going to slowly back away from it and decrease the aid we're giving them rather than increasing, which we are doing right now.
Can I ask Hira a question?
Yeah.
When you were just talking about inflation, you mentioned something about Russia being our main supply of oil. Is that true?
I said it was one of our sources of oil.
But I did some research, and Russia only supplies around 2 to 8% of our oil.
Yeah, it's one of our sources of oil. So if that completely shuts off, that's 2 to 8% less oil than we're normally getting.
Like, okay.
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Oh, sorry, the flag. Okay. Bedri, I have a question for you. So, what exactly do you mean by improving roads and transportation? Like, what is your goal with that?
So improving roads and transportation, I know this personally because my dad has a few trucker friends, and they're talking about how when they're on the road, they just go hours without being able to use the restroom because they're so packed and they can't just stop at those areas because truckers are already waiting to use those restrooms. So they just drive without being able to use the restroom. So I'd probably increase rest areas and just higher quality, areas for truckers. Also, I have one more thing. The raising interests idea, it sounds really good on paper, but it would harm lower income communities because lower income communities rely on loans to pay for some of the things that they have to pay for, right? So it's already hard for minorities to get loans, especially mortgages and stuff. So it's just keeping minoritized groups and oppressed populations down by increasing these interest rates.
Sorry. Really quick, continuing with my question. I meant, like, if you look at roads and transportation, if you increase the same way that they're doing now, just, I guess, improved, wouldn't that also affect your climate change policy?
Yeah. The cement trucks are one of the highest producers of carbon emission, like transportation-wise. So of course it's going to be detrimental, but as long as it helps truckers, I know this sounds contradictory, but if we help this supply chain, right, we're just going to have more funding for renewable energy projects, which should in turn lead to more energy efficient methods of improving infrastructure in the future.
So you're saying in the short run, the climate is less important than the economy?
That's, you're twisting my words. Okay. Okay. So in the short run, what I'm saying is our economy is top priority currently, because without a proper economy, how do you expect to implement all these changes and policies, right? So
But
it's.
without a planet, how do you plan on implementing all these changes and policies?
What do you mean? Like without a plan? Okay, look. It's gonna. We still have a couple more years. Obviously, it's just we're gonna fast track this by. If we improve the infrastructure, make the economy more stable, we'll be able to fund all these renewable energy programs, which should help with the, what you were saying.
I would like to give Emily a chance to respond to Bedri's comment.
To address what Bedri said about the lower income communities and how raising interest rates would affect them, I would say the lower income communities, everyone right now obviously is being affected by inflation. We can see in obvious examples gas prices. These lower income communities are already being heavily affected by these gas prices. They can't even get to work, some of them, because they just need to fill up their car with gas. So I would say we need to fix this problem, and this is, I think, one of the only ways to effectively lower inflation.
Which is why I'm not going to exacerbate the carbon problem by increasing a carbon tax, by raising the carbon tax. I'm not going to exacerbate that by making gas more expensive for lower income communities.
Okay. All right.
Go ahead, Hira.
I think I wanted to say something about the increasing interest rates. Someone on their press release said that address issues by pressuring Federal Reserves to increase interest rates on loans, but increasing interest rates will lead to people being in more debt because that's more money you'll have to pay back, and you can actually get disenfranchised, so losing your right to vote if you are in a lot of debt and haven't been able to pay your fees. So that would also limit the amount of voting rights you'd be able to uphold.
Okay. Oh, wait. Oh, sorry. Nate has a question. Go ahead.
Okay, so Sydney, I have a question for you. In your press release, you're kind of saying that improving the supply chain by like incentivizing truck workers and warehouse workers. If you have noticed recently, almost anyone can, not like long distance cross country trucks, but pretty much anybody can go ahead and just say, hey, I'm gonna be a delivery driver. So when there's already a pretty large availability to be able to do this, what kind of other, like, what else is there besides, because I can just say, I'm going to go work for Amazon, take my Kia Forte, put it up with a bunch of boxes and drive to some guy's house.
So the question for Sydney from Nate was, what other incentives are there for being...
For a widely available, like, delivery market, I guess.
For a delivery market.
For that, almost basic needs such as healthcare and insurance, things that are touched upon in those job descriptions but aren't as harped upon, especially in how this economy is going now. Those incentives like healthcare, those are going to be very important to people going into truck driving, and just as like a little bit of, okay, I can help take care of my family. I don't have to worry as much if I get into a car accident. Those little worries that may be taken off of their mind.
Can I get a short point of clarification here? You said that increasing or decreasing the interest rates can lead to disenfranchisement. Can you clarify what you meant by that?
I said increasing interest rates would lead to more loan and people being in more, or not more loans, sorry. Increasing interest rates will lead to more debt, which would lead to people, having more money to pay back, and you can lose your right to vote because of an abnormal amount of fees that you haven't paid back yet.
So the fees that you have to pay back are things for like speeding tickets, not for debt.
It's also for debt. At least the resource I looked up, it says it's for debt and for fees for driving.
For driving?
Like driving, like speeding
Right.
So
Not like debt in general.
debt in general too, though. If you haven't been able to pay back and you're in an abnormal amount of debt to the government, you can't vote.
To the government would be the speed limits, though.
But okay.
It's not like loan debt.
Yeah,
It's
it's not
like if
loan
you
debt.
don't pay your speed, it's like loan debt.
Thank you for the clarification.
Would we like to move on?
Yeah, we need to move.
Okay, we need to move on to the COVID policies.
Hey,
We're gonna-
we're a little over 3 minutes left before we tie things, so like,
Just do questions.
consider this more or less a 3-minute warning.
Listen, just do questions.
Just do questions?
Question based off the press release.
Questions on COVID.
Okay, do you have a question, Grant?
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Okay, I will start with my questions. So,
Kendall's
I
going
have
next.
A question for Winston and a question for Sydney here. So first I'll start with my question for Winston. In your press release, you said that you will abstain from making any mandates on masks or vaccines, as COVID is not as big of an issue. Obviously, the staff here and the people who picked the platform thought that COVID was a big enough issue to include it on this platform. And I don't think, I think I speak for most people here when I say that COVID has been a huge issue over the past couple of years. So I guess I'm seeking clarification on what you mean by that. And you also say, you know, it's not a big issue, but part of the reason it's not a huge issue now is because of vaccines and mask mandates, which is how we were able to get through these big waves.
The question is Grant to Winston asking for clarification because his platform says that COVID is not that big of an issue.
Okay, so first involving COVID, I know like it is an issue, right? But I feel like at this point in time, right? I feel that there have been spikes, but I feel that it is like not as like, I didn't mean like it wasn't a big issue, but I feel like I don't really want to force a mask mandate or like force like getting vaccinated for people. So I feel we should keep doing what we're doing now, and that it's not as a big of an issue as like it used to be, basically.
Okay, that's good. And then my question for Sydney here is, you said on the platform section where it says, what are your candidates' views as the main problem relates to the issue for COVID, you said we are not firm enough with how we are addressing it. So my question for you is, that's the only section I've seen on all these candidates' platforms. Why do you not have a response to that question?
So for that, I can answer it now if you would like me to. If that,
Sure.
I'm not. If I'm would like to, I don't really understand what you're
He's
asking
saying
me.
it's not on the paper.
Oh, great. So I'll answer that now then. When it wasn't stated, I meant we didn't have as much communication, and we also weren't like firm with how we should do things. We didn't say like, we weren't like as clear of when the vaccines were coming out or where they were, what mask you should use and what masks were mandated. We weren't clear on how the cases were rising, and we weren't clear really on new strains. So for that, my view is that COVID wasn't handled as it should among the communication stance, if that makes sense.
We have a question there. All right. Oh, good. Last question. Good.
This is a general question about COVID. Anyone can answer. I'm talking about the long haulers and some of the long-term effects they have. What do you think the government's responsibility is to aid these people, like long-term effects, like lungs?
All right, pause. So you're each going to get 15 seconds to answer that question, and that'll be how we conclude. So.
Okay, who wants to first? Okay, and go.
I just feel like the government should just promote medicine in order to like support those people by like giving money back in towards the government.
Okay, and go.
In regards to mental health, of course, it's a big issue, but right now we just need to get over this big physical hurdle of dealing with all these COVID patients and the fatalities before we can even consider the mental health repercussions.
All right, next.
I feel that America should absolutely help out those who are getting long-term effects, but we should also be more firm to those who are not as firm with it and who are like, I don't want to wear a mask, I don't want to get my vaccine. We should be more firm to those, that way everyone's not affected.
Okay. Go.
COVID-19
obviously, people on this stage have claimed that it is not, that we need to move on. 1 million people died of this virus. And 8.6 million people suffered the disease. It is a crisis. We need to help those with mental health issues and who are afflicted with the disease with long-term effects.
I think I agree with Aiden that it is a big issue. I mean, over 1 million people have already died. That's 1 million empty seats at the dinner table. So we've encouraged, and it obviously hasn't helped, so we need to either mandate masks or just...
And next, sorry. Well, I think the mental health aspect of that is very important. I think first and foremost, we need to address the numbers in COVID and get them down. I know they're already going down, but we need to focus on that and then address mental health and the long-term issues because that's very important as well.
Thank you.
I told you the other day, maybe 30%. We're already probably at almost half. So you need to get out and make sure you're campaigning the right way. Please do not leave any of your materials behind.